Hi friends, it's Amy. Welcome to my bookish life. Today I want to go through the 20 books that I read in the month of August. So let's get to it. As I said, I read 20 books in the month of August. Audio was a pretty big factor in why I was able to read as much as I was. I was setting up my classroom and just doing a lot of things to get ready for the school year. So being able to sit down and read was really a luxury during the month of August. So I did get some time to do that, and I really savored it when I was able to. During the month of August, I read 6,072 pages for an average of about 303.6 pages per book, 202.4 pages per day, and I gave an average rating of 4.5 stars. The range of my star ratings was between 3 stars and 5 stars. I read 13 books for an adult audience, 2 for YA, and 3 middle grades. In terms of format, I read in some combination 8 physical books, 8 digital books, and 10 audiobooks. 19 of the books I read were fiction. 1 book was nonfiction. 15 of the books I read were from my own personal library, and 5 were borrowed. I want to start by going through my amazing TBR prompts. So I did 5 turns in the month of August. It was my very first time doing my TBR game. It was so much fun and I really enjoyed it. It was fun to pick out books for the prompts and it was great. So the first turn that I did had initials like mine. So I wrote this prompt meaning that the author needed to have one initial that shared with me. And I ended up reading The Bodyguard by Catherine Center in order to fulfill this prompt. Center is her last name, starts with C, and Christina is my middle name, and it starts with C. So that is what I did. My second turn, I needed a book with multiple authors. For this, I read The Honeydew List by Christina Lauren. Christina Lauren is actually a author team made up of Christina and Lauren, and it was really just a perfect excuse to finally read The Honeydew List. Enjoyed it. It was great. The third prompt that I had was an audiobook, and I read Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey, and I enjoyed most of it. There were definitely parts of that book that were difficult to listen to, but it was really fun to have Matthew McConaughey in my ears. Then my fourth turn was a middle grade historical fiction, and YA can work with either adult or middle grade. So I wrote down To Stay Alive by Silka Brown. However, if you don't want to count that as middle grade historical fiction because it's kind of YA, I did also read Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and that is definitely middle grade, definitely historical fiction. So I did fulfill that prompt. And then my fifth and final turn was historical fiction adult, and I read Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon, and that was my very first Amy Harmon. Definitely won't be my last. I'll get to that in a second. I was successful with my Tic Tac TBR. Super proud of this one. I was done with it actually very early in the month, so that was great. So, yeah. Success on all counts. All right, so let's go book by book. The first book that I finished in the month of August was Death on a Cliff by Rosalie Spielman. This is a cozy mystery. It's part of the Aloha Lagoon cozy mystery series. It is the second one by Rosalie Spielman. If you know anything about the series, it is written by multiple authors, and most of the books can be read as standalones. But what I suggest is that you read all the books by one author in the order that they were written. Death on a Cliff was really a great addition to the Aloha Lagoon mystery series. I really like the characters that Rosalie Spielman created for her story. We have Kiki and Dex are the main couple, and they're just so cute. Dex is like a big teddy bear. I just love him. He's so great. And it was really fun. It was a lot of fun. Oh, Death on a Cliff was actually an advanced reader copy that I got from Gemma Halliday Publishing, so thank you very much. The next book that I read in the month of August was Gravebooks by J.A. White. This was an advanced reader copy from NetGalley, so thank you very much to them. This is the sequel to J.A. White's Night Books. I loved Night Books. It was incredibly creepy. This retelling of 1001. It's a retelling of the story where every night the main character had to tell a story to the king, and if it was good enough, then he would get to live. So that is essentially what happened to Alex in the first book. Now we are back in the second book, and there is a grave that has all of the stories that Alex started but never finished. So each story that he started actually has a grave, and in order to make it right, he needs to finish the stories so that they're restless souls, essentially. It's kind of crazy, but also really, really cool. I really enjoyed it. One thing that I really liked about this one is if you have been watching my channel for a period of time, you may know that one thing that's really important to me is how mental health issues are handled in books. And one thing that I loved about Gravebooks is that it actually explored how the events of Night Books would affect the children going further. So I just loved that their mental health was actually mentioned in the sequel, and it wasn't like this taboo thing, and it was just this thing that needed to happen and needed to be talked about now. And I just loved that it wasn't ignored, and it wasn't just, it's going to be fine. Everything's fine. They just went through this super traumatic thing and now everybody's fine. And that's completely unrealistic. I know that it's not a realistic book. It's a thriller. It's a ghost story. Like, I understand that it's not completely realistic, but I love that addition of the realistic effects that kind of situation can have on a child or even an adult. So that was one thing that I really appreciated about Gravebooks, for sure. The next book that I finished was The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. This is the second book in the Thursday Murder Club series, and I just loved this. These books are just a hoot and a half. I love how in-depth they are into mystery and intrigue, but also have that heart and humor. Such a wonderful combination, and I just love it. This one delves deeper into Elizabeth's past and what she did before she moved into the retirement community, and it makes a lot of sense as to why she was as adept at solving murders during the first book. It was a lot of fun and definitely a really great audiobook if you're looking for one. The next book that I finished was Ceces Journal by Joris, Chamblain, Joris Chamblain. This book was highly recommended by Krista from Books and Jams. Krista's really good at making all books sound absolutely fabulous, and it's really hard to resist putting some of the books on my holds list as soon as she talks about them. So this book came through in my library. It was so good. It's beautifully illustrated. The story is crafted in a way that is just spectacular. The friendships involved in Ceces Journal, how she grows as a person in her friendships, is just wonderful. And so good. Loved the little mysteries involved. And I was talking to Krista about I mentioned it in a live, I think, and Krista was like, Amy, you are going to love that book and you're going to want to buy it for your classroom. And she was for sure right. Like, the next book that I finished was a Rover Story by Jasmine Warga. This was an ARC from NetGalley. Thank you to them. This actually follows Rez, the nickname of Resilience, who is a Mars rover. It starts with him being built and tested in the lab, and then it actually goes into him being sent to Mars in order to rove. And it's just wonderful. If you've ever read The Wild Robots, it definitely has those kind of vibes. It's just really, really good. A lot of fun. I read it so fast, and then I was really sad. I was so sad when it was done because I just loved the characters that came out in this. And it's one thing that's really cool that Jasmine Warga did is that when the Mars rover is in space, we actually get to know what's happening on Earth because the scientist's daughter is writing letters to Rez. She doesn't send them or anything. It's like kind of a journal that she keeps, but we're reading those journal entries or those letters, and it allows us to see what's happening on Earth as Rez is up in Mars. Anyway, it's absolutely beautiful. I need to have it in my classroom as soon as possible. I want to read it to my students, but it doesn't come out until October. All right, the next book that I finished was Greenlights. This is the book that I read for my audiobook for my TBR game, and I really did like a lot of Matthew McConaughey's stories. He is a masterful storyteller, and it was amazing to listen to how he crafted these stories. However, some of his imagery and metaphor was kind of hard to hear. And the thing is, I had watched Sing fairly recently, and so not only was I listening to Matthew McConaughey, I felt like I was listening to Buster Moon, and Buster Moon talking about those things is a little rough. It's a bit rough. I do recommend it. Just know that some of his imagery is a little bit like, okay. The next book that I finished was To Stay Alive by Skila Brown. This is a YA historical fiction novel in verse about the Donner Party of 1846. Oh my gosh, it was so good. This follows Mary Ann Graves, who was a member of the Donner Party. It was really tough to read, but it was really, really interesting and absolutely beautifully written. These tough topics and the decisions that they had to make really came through, and it was really well. It was well crafted and well written, and I really, really, I really enjoyed it. Oh, that sounds so weird. Oh, that sounds so weird. But I did. I really liked it. It was good. But it was a book that I had to take breaks from. I couldn't read it all at once. I would, something bad would happen and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need to take a break. I had to be in the right headspace for it, and I wasn't always. So there's that. The next book that I finished was Verity by Colleen Hoover, and This was also a tough book to read, but it was so propulsive that definitely read it in a very short amount of time. And my brain felt broken when I was done reading it. I didn't know how to process it. It was so crazy. And I mean, it gives you Gone Girl vibes for sure. It's this crazy story of a young woman named Lowen who is hired to finish the stories of Verity, finish the novels of Verity, who's been in a car accident. And as she goes to do that, she finds this manuscript that Verity was working on that is not the novels that she was hired to write, but an autobiography. And trigger warnings out of this world. Like, there are so many. So definitely, if you are somebody that needs to know about the trigger warnings, definitely look into them. And probably maybe just stay away from this one because there are so many. However, I couldn't put it down. I couldn't. Like, there was no putting this book down at all. It's crazy. The next book that I finished was The Hawthorne Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the second book in the Inheritance Games trilogy, and I just love this series. It's so fun. I love the mysteries, the puzzles, and it's so intriguing, so suspenseful, so propulsive. I just loved it. It was a lot of fun. The first book, The Inheritance Games, follows Avery, who finds out that she has inherited the entire estate of this person that she barely knows. And part of her being able to collect this windfall is that she has to live in the house that she inherited for a year with the family that was disinherited, which is so weird. But there is, you know, a whole situation with these young boys these young men that are part of the family that were disowned. And, you know, she has very different relationships with each of them. And it's not all romantic, which I think is really great. Like, it's not all like, I need to make out with all these guys. Like, I really liked that there wasn't so much focus on romantic type things in this YA book. So I really appreciated that about this series so far. There definitely is that hint of romance between Avery and one of the brothers, at least one of the brothers. But it's not an entire focus, and it isn't something that is like making or breaking it. Like, you know, it's not what the book is about, and I really liked that. So many family secrets are coming to light in this one. I love family secrets. It's definitely a buzzword for me, and yeah. So the third book, The Final Gamut, the third and final book, The Final Gamut, came out just at the end of August, and it is on my holds list. It'll be a while before I get it, but you can bet that is not going to be one that I push my hold on. I am definitely going to read that as soon as I get my hands on it. The next book that I read is Daisy Jones and the Sixth by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was the In Real Life book pick for my library book club, and it was fun. I liked it. I don't know that this is a book that has been on my TBR for quite some time. It was actually on my Kindle. I've had it on my Kindle for probably at least 2 years. I'm not very good at reading the books on my Kindle, and it's definitely something I've been trying to fix lately this year, but it's not going very well either. So there's that. Daisy Jones and the Sixth is a transcript of a behind the bands type documentary of this band Daisy Jones and the Six. And it's told in that transcript format. So there isn't any like narrative really. Every action that's told needs to be told by a character. And it's just kind of a really fascinating way, I think, to tell a story and to be able to bring all of the aspects of storytelling into that different format. I really like differently formatted books. I just think it's fabulous to try to tell a story in a different way. I think it's really fun. Definitely, there are a lot of trigger warnings here. It is about a band in the 60s. This is really the month of trigger warnings for me. I read so many books that had trigger warnings in them. It was crazy. But I enjoyed the book still. So yeah, if you are if you're somebody that is sensitive while reading, one thing in particular really did bother me when I was reading this book. It was really difficult for me to read that part of it. That part was difficult. It didn't really hamper my enjoyment of the book, but it was definitely difficult for me to read. So definitely look into those trigger warnings. The next book that I read was Seasoned with Murder by Catherine Bruns. This is the 12th book in the Cookies and Chance mystery series. I love this series so much. It doesn't actually come out until September 20th, which at the time of recording this is actually very close to now. But when I read it, it was pretty far away yet. And I really try not to read a book so far in advance. However, I could not wait. I love the characters in the Cookies and Chance series. I love how they interact. Their banter is wonderful. I just think their relationships are really strong. And this one did focus a lot on Sal, who is the main character, and Amateur Sleuth, on Sal's grandmother and her best friend. It's just a hoot to me. This book in particular finds them on a cruise ship, and it's, there's a murder. It's a cozy mystery. It's a lot of fun. Loved it. The next book that I read was Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon. And this book actually takes place on the Overland Trail in 1853, which is kind of weird that I read two books so close together that take place within about 5 years of each other. But it is what it is. If you grew up playing the Oregon Trail, which I did a lot, it was a substantial part of my education growing up, you're probably going to like this and connect with this. This follows Naomi May, who travels with her family. She's recently widowed. Her husband's family is also traveling with them, not too happy with Naomi for multiple reasons. They're mad at her to begin with because they feel like she's not grieving enough for their son, which, I kind of get, but, I kind of see her side too. But then along the way, they encounter John Laurie, who is part Indian, and sparks fly almost immediately between John and Naomi, and this really causes problems. People are not happy. Again, there's a lot of trigger warnings for this book. So yeah, definitely be aware of that. There's going to be death. It's about a family trying to, immigrate across the United States. There's death. There is. There's a lot of discrimination, some that is very difficult to read. But it's a really good, really, really good book. one thing that I liked about Naomi is that she is an artist, and her art is part of what helps her and sustains her and keeps her safe, actually. This was available on KU, so I actually was able to read it as a digital copy, but also the audio is available through KU as well, so I was able to listen and read along every once in a while. So it was really a great experience. Loved it. The next book that I finished was The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, and this is a new favorite. I loved this book so much. I don't even have it anymore because I pushed it into somebody's hand the first chance I got. I will be so sad if she forgets to give it back to me. I will buy it again. Make no mistake. I love this book. I read this as part of the Create Your Own Readathon that was sponsored or hosted by Sarah, the Book of Schnitter. And so that vlog I will attach somewhere. I read it to complete the Read Your Shelves challenge for August because it was a buddy part in the title. Hannah is a bodyguard, and she is tasked with guarding an actor, Jack Stapleton, who has a interesting stalker. But he doesn't want his family to know that he has a stalker. He doesn't want them to know that there's a problem. So he asks her to pretend that they are dating in order to give the illusion that that's why she's there and that she's not there to protect him and his family. There is so much banter here. There's so much heart here. The exploration of grief and finding hope within your grief is just beautiful. I absolutely loved it. I wanted to start it right away all over again. I just loved it. It was so good. So good. Same weekend, I was reading The Guest List by Lucy Foley, and I was reading that for the Buzzword reading challenge for an item or object in the title for list. That was also part of the Create Your Own Readathon vlog that I will attach down below. I liked this one as well. The different perspectives were really compelling and really added to the suspense of the story. I loved how the setting was almost a character within itself, and I was pretty hooked. It was a really great reading weekend, I must say. The next book that I finished was Hula Homicide by B.A. Trimmer. You're probably thinking, Amy, that sounds like a cozy mystery, and you are totally right. And you may be thinking that also sounds like it might be part of the Aloha Lagoon mystery series, which you actually just talked about at the beginning of this video, and you would also be right. This is another installment of the Aloha Lagoon cozy mystery series that comes directly after Death on a Cliff, which was the first book that I read this in August. This follows the wedding planner at Aloha Lagoon Resort, Christy Piper, and this is the first Aloha Lagoon from B.A. Trimmer. So you could actually read this without having read any of the other ones. However, this book actually does have a lot of Easter eggs referring back to previous series. Nothing that you need to have read the rest of the series in order to understand, but it's just kind of little nods to the other series, which are really fun and kind of cool. A lot of fun. We have a groomsman that is dead, which you're probably thinking, hey, Amy, isn't The Guest List about a wedding where somebody dies? And you'd be right. I read 2 books in a row about weddings where somebody died. I don't want to read too much into that, so we're going to move on. The next book that I finished was Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder. This was a buddy read with my friend Rainy from Rainy Day Reads. This is The second book in the Little House on the Prairie series, depending on how you look at it, it's the second or the third. This actually follows Almanzo as a young child. It starts when he's 9 and starting school. It was really fun to see his adventures growing up. It was really cool to compare Laura's family from Little House in the Big Woods to Almanzo's family in Farmer Boy, and just like the parallels between them and the complete differences between them. It was really, really interesting and a lot of fun. The only thing that I have to say about this is that the narrator, the audiobook narrator, because I listen to it every once in a while, I was listening to it, and the audiobook narrator pronounced his name Almanzo. Now, I never once thought that his name was Almanzo, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I've always pronounced it Almanzo. So I didn't like that. It really, every single time the name Almanzo was in the story and I was listening to it, I cringed. It was terrible. Anyway, I really liked it. It was really fun to read. It was really cute and really fun. And I'm kind of sad that I didn't read that one when I was younger, probably because it was about a boy. And silly me. Anyway, the next book that I finished was Charlotte's Web by Evie White. This was a reread for me. I read it when I was in 3rd grade. It was one of my favorite books. Growing up, like, I remember Charlotte's Web being a favorite book of mine. I love watching the cartoon version of the movie. When I was growing up, I watched it all the time. I loved it. I listened to this. It is narrated by Meryl Streep, and it has a full cast. It is so good. Get your hands on this audio. I got it from my library. I didn't even remember putting it on hold. That's how long it took me to get the book. But it was so good. It was so worth the wait. And just listening to it again and just being back into that world, it was so good. It was so good. It was so good. Charlotte's Web, narrated by Meryl Streep. Get your hands on it. There's a part of me that wants to just go on Audible and use a credit, and so I can have it and listen to it whenever I want. It was so good. So good. Yeah. The next book that I finished was Dear Edward by Anne Napolitano, and this again was a reread for me. This was the pick for Krista's Patreon book club, and so I wanted to reread it so that I could be involved in the discussion when they had it. And I just fell in love with this book all over again. I love it. I still love it. I loved it when I read it the first time. I still love it now. It's so filled with hope and so beautifully written. I just love it. It's a very dire premise. You have a plane crash and the only survivor is this little boy. And then the whole rest of the book is how this boy goes about living his life after being the only survivor, losing his whole family and having to deal with the fact that he got to survive and all of these other people didn't. And it's just so beautiful. And it doesn't even sound like a premise that could be filled with so much hope, but it really is. It's just so hopeful and so beautiful and wonderful. And I just love Dear Edward. I love it. I love Edward. I love Shay. Shay and Edward is literally the epitome of what friendship is supposed to look like. I love it so much. The next book that I finished was The Light Between Oceans by M.L. Stedman. This was a buddy read with my dear friends Danielle from Bookara and Amy from A-Star Reads. It took us a little bit to get into this. However, we all really liked it once we got into it. This follows Tom and Izzy. They live on Janus Island. Tom is the lighthouse keeper, Izzy is his wife, and they really struggle with infertility. One day, it's the middle of the night, and a boat comes ashore, and in the boat is a dead man and a baby. Now, Izzy has just lost another child and thinks that it is a sign that God is sending her this baby. And what follows is the most devastating look at consequences of actions and guilt, and it's beautiful. And oh man, tears were shed. I definitely tried to read this, or I tried to listen to this. The audio, I do not recommend. As much as I enjoyed having an actual Australian accent in my ears, it takes place in Australia, as much as I enjoyed having that actual Australian accent in my ears, every time the narrator got to the end of a line, it got so quiet that I couldn't hear it. So I was missing word. Like I couldn't get along with the audiobook. However, it's definitely a book worth reading. It's definitely a book that you're going to want to discuss. It's perfect as a buddy read, as a book club pick. It's perfect to discuss scruples and morality and morally gray characters. And it's good. It's really, really good. Yeah. It's really good. And then finally, the last book that I read in the month of August was The Honeydew List by Christina Lauren. This was a book that I really wanted to get in because I needed it. I needed it for my TBR game and did it. Yeah. So The Honeydew List is about Carrie and James, and they are both assistants to a Chip and Joanna Gaines type couple called Melissa and Rusty Tripp. And they are a married couple. They renovate houses. They do different design innovations for houses, decorating, and they also write books. And their recent book is a how-to type book on how to have a happy marriage. The only problem with that is that they hate each other. So Carrie and James need to make sure that on the book tour, Melissa and Rusty don't kill each other. And as they are doing this, they slowly, there's sparks. So it's a really cute rom-com. I really like reality TV tropes in books, so I thought it was great. It was my second Christina Lauren book. The first one was The Unhoneymooners, and I loved The Unhoneymooners. I gave it 5 stars. The Honeydew List, I have heard mixed reviews about it, but I thought it was adorable. I gave it 4 stars. I liked it. So, there you go. I thought that Carrie and James were really great characters. They had definitely a banter. They had a definite passion for what they do and for each other. It was great. It was adorable. I liked it a lot. So there you have it. Those are the 20 books that I read during the month of August. It was a great reading month. I absolutely loved so many of the books that I was reading and listening to. It was great. It was a great reading month. I would love to hear what you have to say about any of these books. Have you heard of them? Have you read them? Did you like them? Did you hate them? Did you add any of them to your TBR? I would love to hear from you down in the comments. I hope you're finding something wonderful to read, and until next time, happy reading. Bye!